Here's a powerful cinematic 80 to 100 word gripping hook based exactly on your title and intent. A shy waitress quietly approaches a powerful billionaire's table. But instead of speaking, she gently raises her hands and signs a simple sentence to his deaf father. In seconds, the old man's eyes fill with tears. The billionaire freezes. The entire restaurant falls silent, because what she signs doesn't just melt a heart. It uncovers a $50 million lie, exposes the real villain, and rewrites 3 destinies forever. Stay till the end, because sometimes kindness isn't just kindness. It's truth, courage, and fate arriving at the right moment. Sophie had mastered the art of disappearing. While other waitresses laughed loudly, told stories, and glowed under warm cafe lights, she stayed in the corner, soft-spoken, polite, always careful not to exist too much. Customers remembered the food, the place, the music, but rarely her. And for Sophie, that felt safer. Yet once, she had been someone impossible to ignore. She was a rising architectural engineer, brilliant, confident, a woman who designed buildings that seemed to breathe with life. She dreamed of cities touched by kindness, homes filled with light, structures that healed people the way she once hoped life would heal her. Then Ryan happened, her fiancé, her partner, the man she trusted most. He stole her designs, claimed her brilliance as his own, left her blamed for fraud, while he rose to fame, fortune, and applause built on her talent. One betrayal, and everything collapsed. Her career vanished. Friends disappeared. Her parents looked at her with a question in their eyes. How could this happen to you? And in that humiliation, Sophie slowly shrank. Now she poured coffee, picked up plates, smiled without letting it reach her eyes. She convinced herself this quiet life was enough. No spotlight, no expectations, no more ways for the world to hurt her. Every night, she whispered, "I'm fine, invisible is safe." But fate doesn't forget people like Sophie, the gentle ones, the broken yet still kind, the ones destiny isn't finished writing. Because one ordinary afternoon, the door of the restaurant opened, and the moment she looked up, everything she thought she'd lost control of shifted. She believed life had already taken everything from her. She didn't know. Life wasn't done yet. The restaurant's bell chimed softly, nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Yet somehow the entire place felt different when they walked in. James Bennett. The name alone carried the weight of cities, companies, headlines, and fear. He walked like a man who owned everything he touched. Dark suit, silent confidence, eyes that never softened. People didn't look at James, they avoided him. Staff stiffened. Customers whispered. Managers straightened their ties and forced smiles. Beside him, moving just a little slower, was his father. William Bennett was the kind of presence that made you feel warm without speaking a word, because he couldn't. Age had softened him like ocean waves, smooth as stone. His hair had gone silver, his hands trembled a little when he walked, but his eyes carried stories deeper than sound could ever hold. He looked around the room like he wished he could hear the laughter, like he wished he could belong. But no one spoke to him. Not properly. Not truly. People leaned toward James. They spoke loudly, awkwardly, as if volume could replace understanding. Waiters nodded at William, then ignored him. Even James, powerful and focused, seemed distant from his own father, checking his phone between stiff gestures, tapping at business emails like life was a competition he could never stop running. They sat at Sophie's table. She froze. Her heart hammered. Everyone in town knew who this was. The billionaire with the ruthless reputation, the kingmaker of corporations, and a silent father always shadowing him. Sophie swallowed, steadied her tray, and walked forward. "Good afternoon," she whispered automatically. William blinked up at her. His face gave a small, confused smile, the kind people make when they wish they understood what was said. James looked impatient already. "He can't hear you," he muttered, not unkindly, just tired. And then something inside Sophie stirred, something that had been quiet for far too long. Without thinking, she gently set the menus down and raised her hands. Slowly, respectfully, carefully. Her fingers began to move. Hello. Welcome. It's really nice to meet you. William's world, a world of silence, suddenly filled with meaning. His eyes widened. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Then his lips parted, and emotion flooded his face like sunlight breaking over a frozen ocean. He understood. Someone finally spoke to him and not around him. His wrinkled hands lifted shakily, responding, his movements rusty but certain. You sign? He asked with trembling joy. Yes, Sophie answered, smiling for real, a smile that wasn't practiced, wasn't polite, wasn't hiding. The restaurant stilled. James slowly looked up from his emails. He'd seen his father expressive before, but this was different. William wasn't just present. He was alive again. He wasn't the quiet, background figure everyone pitied. He was seen. A tear slipped silently down his cheek, and Sophie's soft eyes mirrored it. She didn't gasp or make a scene. She simply acknowledged it with a gentle nod, the way people fluent in silent conversations do. James watched, stunned. He was used to applause, to fear, to negotiations and numbers. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to seeing his father so happy. What is he saying? James finally asked, voice lower, softer. Sophie hesitated, not wanting to break the magic, then translated softly. He said it's been years since anyone spoke to him properly. He said he feels human right now. William touched Sophie's hand, thanking her again and again with grateful gestures. The manager hovered nearby, whispering urgently, "Serve them fast. That's the Bennetts. Be careful. Don't bother them." But James wasn't annoyed. He was staring. For the first time in a long time, he noticed someone. Sit. William signed insistently. He wanted to talk. So Sophie did. She learned that William lost his hearing fully 5 years ago after a stroke. People grew impatient. Conversations faded. Parties became silent prisons. Even James, buried under empires and deadlines, visited, but rarely connected. Sophie didn't judge him. She just listened. Then William signed something more personal. You look like someone who knows pain. Sophie's mask faltered. James glanced between them, unsure but deeply curious. What did he say? Sophie inhaled shakily. He asked why someone with such kind eyes looks so sad. James froze. No one said things like that to strangers. But William could read hearts like books. Sophie looked down, fingers trembling slightly. William waited. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He simply offered silence, safe silence, the kind that invites truth. And for the first time in years, she told it. Her hands moved gently in sign language as she spoke aloud so James could understand too. She talked about studying day and night, about designing buildings filled with light, about believing in love and in Ryan. Ryan, her fiancé, her betrayer, how he stole her work, how he registered her designs under his company name, how he took a $50 million corporate deal that was meant to be hers and left her career in ruins, labeled a thief of her own dreams. As she spoke, William leaned forward, eyes burning with empathy. James' jaw tightened. Something in the air shifted. What was his name? James asked carefully, voice edged with something dangerous. Ryan Cole, she whispered. Silence. Not the heavy silence of awkwardness. Not the painful silence Sophie once lived in. This silence was realization. James stilled completely. Ryan Cole, architect, recently risen to fame. Current lead on a $50 million luxury development deal with James' company. The deal James was finalizing. The deal James believed Ryan created. The deal James trusted. He looked at Sophie, this quiet girl, this invisible soul, and then at his father who nodded slowly. William signed one sentence to James. Listen to her. James swallowed. For the first time in a very long time, he felt something powerful. Doubt, rage, protectiveness, truth whispering beneath lies. He stared at Sophie, at her pain, yes, but also at the dignity she wore like fragile armor. This wasn't coincidence. This was destiny pulling a thread. And as the restaurant murmured back to life around them, James realized something terrifying. The $50 million deal he was about to sign might not belong to Ryan at all. It might belong to the shy waitress, The woman the world stopped seeing, the woman fate had just brought back into the light. James didn't sleep that night. He wasn't a man easily shaken. Markets crashed, competitors tried to destroy him, storms hit business empires, and he stood firm. But this wasn't business. This wasn't strategy. This was injustice wearing a familiar face. Ryan Cole, the man he was about to trust with a $50 million development. The man he praised in interviews. The man whose work redefined innovation. Or so he believed. Now, those designs had a heartbeat behind them. A trembling voice. A pair of wounded but honest eyes. Sophie. And James couldn't ignore that. He sat in his office deep into the night, city lights glittering below like countless silent witnesses. Screens glowed. Files opened. Layers peeled back. His staff was accustomed to urgent midnight calls, but this time his voice carried a different gravity. Pull everything on Ryan Cole, he ordered quietly. Academic history, patent filings, email trails, design repositories. Every project blueprint. No questions asked, because when James Bennett went cold, the world prepared. Hours turned to dawn. Coffee replaced sleep, and the truth began to bleed through. The first blow landed quietly. A junior analyst whispered, "Sir, something's wrong with the design metadata." James' jaw clenched. "Show me." Every blueprint, every file carried digital signatures. Hidden tags. Original creation timestamps. None of them pointed to Ryan. They pointed to someone else. A woman's initials. Same pattern. Same registered engineering account, ID, repeatedly overwritten later. SR. Sophie Reynolds. His heart pounded. He dug deeper. Patent registry accessed. 17 separate designs. 17 brilliant, innovative architectural filings. Every single one, transferred to Ryan after Sophie disappeared from her field, using illegal authorization. 17 thefts. His fist curled slowly against the desk. "Give me proof," he said softly. And proof came. Emails marked private, but never truly gone. Threats disguised as concern. Gaslighting disguised as love. Ryan telling Sophie she wasn't ready. Ryan filing behind her back. Ryan pulling corporate strings. One message stood out like a knife. "Don't make this difficult, Sophie. No one will believe you anyway." James closed his eyes. The calmness didn't break. It hardened. He felt anger, but also something stronger. Purpose. He wasn't just a billionaire now. He wasn't just powerful. He was a man who could do something. And, for the first time in years, his father was proud of him without saying a word. Sophie didn't know any of this yet. She spent the next morning working like always, quiet, careful, tucked behind fear like a child behind a wall. Part of her regretted telling them anything. Regret was familiar. Regret was easier than hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope hurt when it shattered. She was clearing a table when the door opened again. James walked in, not with cameras, not with arrogance, not with the world bowing at his feet. He walked in like a storm that wasn't loud, just unstoppable. William followed, smiling the warm smile only Sophie seemed to understand. James approached slowly, like she might run if he moved too fast. "We need to talk," he said softly. Her breath hitched. They sat again. Same table. Different air. Sophie's hands shook. "If this is about yesterday, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything." Sophie." His voice was firm but kind. He didn't interrupt people often, but this mattered. "I investigated." Her heart dropped through the floor. "No, please don't." "James, I didn't tell you to. I don't want trouble. I don't want to ruin anything. He's powerful. He always wins." William reached across the table, gently holding her trembling hands. "Be still," he signed gently. "You're safe here." James leaned forward. "You weren't wrong," he said slowly. "You were robbed." Silence slammed between them. He placed a thin folder on the table. Inside her life, her emails, her designs, her original registry IDs, her university mentors' archived records, time-stamped creation logs. Proof. 17 times. Sophie's chest tightened. Her throat closed. Her vision blurred. She didn't cry pretty tears anymore. She cried like someone whose lungs had been underwater for years and finally breathed. Her voice broke. "He told me no one would ever believe me." James' eyes softened. Then he underestimated the wrong woman. Her hands trembled harder. But what does proof even matter? He has lawyers, power, reputation. He'll twist it. He always twists it. Fear wasn't loud. Fear whispered. And Sophie had lived inside its whisper too long. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I've gone to war with governments, he said quietly. You think I'm scared of a thief. But this wasn't about pride. Not about ego. Not about dominance. It was about justice. It was about right and wrong. It was about restoring the soul someone tried to erase. I believe you, he said. 3 simple words. They didn't come from obligation. They came from somewhere real. William squeezed her hands. His eyes shone. He signed softly. You deserve your life back. Her lips trembled. Her heart screamed she couldn't do this. Her scars shouted louder. What if I lose? She whispered. James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, studying her not like a victim, but like someone powerful who just hadn't remembered yet. Then we lose together, he said simply. But you won't be alone. She closed her eyes. For the first time, the weight wasn't all hers. Years ago, she stood alone in a storm and broke. Now the storm stood beside her. Courage didn't roar back suddenly. It flickered, small, fragile. But it was there, a spark. James slid the file toward her. This is your truth. And I have legal teams who don't sleep unless I tell them to. Investigators. Journalists waiting for stories like this. Boards ready to listen to evidence. He paused. Not businessman, not billionaire, just human. But I won't move a single step unless you say you're ready. Not control. Not force. Choice. Her choice. Tears spilled again. Not of pain. Of returning strength. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I want my life back. James smiled for the first time since he'd walked in. Then let's fight this. William exhaled deeply, as if releasing years of silent anger on her behalf. He signed something that made Sophie laugh through tears. Let's scare him. Courage crept back in her chest. Not loud, not blazing, but alive. Hope didn't feel terrifying anymore. It felt powerful. They stood together, a billionaire with fire in his eyes, a deaf father with wisdom in his soul, and a once invisible girl slowly stepping back in her worth. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was justice waking up. James gathered the file, business mode settling like armor. Prepare yourself, he warned gently. Ryan won't surrender quietly. People who build empires on lies always fight when the truth knocks. Sophie nodded. I've spent years being quiet, she replied softly. Not weak. Quiet like a bow drawn back. Quiet like a storm building. Quiet before thunder. James offered his hand. She took it, not as a dependent, not as someone rescued, as a partner in truth. They walked toward the door, the world suddenly bigger, louder, brighter than fear had allowed it to be. Outside the cafe, wind stirred like something waking, because a line had been drawn, a battle chosen, a thief about to face consequences. And somewhere far away, Ryan Cole had no idea that the future he stole was coming back to claim itself. The truth had finally decided to fight back, and a showdown was coming. The boardroom was made of glass and steel, elegant, powerful, intimidating, the kind of place where billion-dollar futures were decided and reputations either shine brighter or burn to ashes. Ryan Cole walked in like he owned gravity. Perfect suit, confident smirk, expensive watch glinting under fluorescent lights. He carried the same charm that once convinced Sophie she was safe and the same arrogance that convinced him he would never be caught. Executives nodded. Assistants straightened. Whispers fluttered like nervous birds. He had no idea the wind had already changed direction. James! Ryan grinned broadly, extending a hand as if approaching an old friend. I heard you want to finalize the deal personally. Figured you'd eventually want to celebrate with the genius behind your future. James didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't shake his hand. He simply looked out cold. Sit. Something in the tone made Ryan hesitate a fraction, just enough for anyone paying attention to notice. But his ego smoothed it over. He laughed lightly and sat, adjusting his tie as if cameras were rolling. All right, he said cheerfully. Let's talk brilliance. Oh, we will. James replied softly. He pressed a button. The large digital screen behind him lit up with architectural blueprints, sweeping structures, breathtaking innovation, designs that weren't just technical achievements, they were art. Ryan smirked proudly. Yes, my work. Exactly, James cut in calmly. Your work. So let's talk about it. There was a dangerous calm in his voice. He leaned forward. Walk me through the structural load distribution on the central arch of this model. Ryan blinked. Excuse me? James repeated patiently, like a teacher asking a student who hadn't done his homework. The arch structural load distribution. Explain the adjustments that stabilize it. Ryan chuckled nervously. James, come on. You and I both know that's engineering team language. I handle vision, leadership, creative direction. James' gaze sharpened. So you can't explain it? Ryan rolled his shoulders dismissively. It's my idea. I hired people to polish the math. James clicked to the next slide. What about this one, he asked. Explain the airflow optimization function, the modification you supposedly developed. Ryan's smile tightened. Well, it's airflow optimized, he laughed weakly. You know how technical people get. You'd need a whole department to. James' voice turned quiet enough to cut. I'm technical people, Ryan. Silence snapped. Every executive stilled. Ryan swallowed. Another slide. Then another. Then another. Each design wasn't just questioned generally. James went straight for the heart of conceptual understanding, asking for reasoning only the original designer would know. Ryan's charm began to fracture. His fake confidence began to sweat. He stuttered. He fumbled. He guessed wrong. He looked like a student cheating on a test who suddenly found out the examiner wrote the textbook. James leaned back slowly, now absolutely certain of the truth. You've built a career on these designs, he said softly. So, answer something simple. His eyes chilled. Who actually created them? Ryan laughed again. Too loud now, too desperate. What is this? A joke? I came here expecting a contract signing. You know my reputation. I'm one of the best visionary architects in The boardroom door opened. Ryan stopped speaking. His breath hitched. Because Sophie walked in. She wasn't the girl he'd broken. Not the trembling woman who once cried behind closed doors while he decided her future. She walked with quiet power. Eyes steady, back straight. William smiled proudly from behind her. James didn't even hide the relief in his face when she entered, because she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, Ryan panicked. Sophie, he scoffed, masking fear with arrogance. What are you doing here? She didn't answer him. She walked straight past him and stood beside James. Not behind him, not shrinking beside him. Equal. James spoke calmly. Ryan, meet the actual designer of the empire you tried to build. Ryan's mask cracked. That's ridiculous, he snapped. She's bitter. She's lying. Enough, James said with quiet authority. He nodded. The screen changed again. Metadata appeared. Timestamps. Original creator IDs. Server logs. 17 patents. Every one under Sophie's name first. Then overwritten, always by Ryan. Emails projected next. His threats. His manipulation. His subtle blackmail. And then, a devastating final slide. A recorded, legally retrieved draft contract. Ryan signing Sophie's intellectual work into his company's control. Ryan's face went pale. The room erupted in whispers. Executives stiffened. Lawyers leaned forward sharply. Phones were put down. The air itself seemed to listen. James folded his hands. You stole everything she built, he said, and then you built your name on it. Ryan's jaw trembled. He turned to Sophie finally, and, for the first time, the charming voice disappeared. He snarled. You should have stayed quiet. The room gasped. There it was. The real him. The man who broke her. The man who convinced her no one would believe her. The coward who hid behind power. Sophie didn't flinch. Her voice didn't shake. Quiet is what you need from people to survive, she said softly. But I don't live in silence anymore. Ryan laughed bitterly. You can't win this, Sophie. I have friends. Lawyers. Media. James leaned forward. No, he said calmly. You had power. He slid a paper across the table. Contract canceled. Permanently. Fraud clause activated. A lawyer spoke next. Your professional license will be reviewed. Criminal charges are now viable. Media has already been notified with proof. Ryan's world shattered in seconds. No, no you can't. I'll ruin you. I'll... Security stepped closer. James' gaze hardened. You built your empire on stolen dreams, he said coldly. Today, those dreams return to their rightful owner. Ryan turned desperately to Sophie. For a brief moment, the monster broke. The boy inside him pleaded. Sophie, please don't do this. We built everything together. You need me. I made you. Her eyes softened, not with love, with clarity. You didn't make me, she whispered. You tried to erase me, but I'm still here, and you are done. William smiled faintly, a proud, soft smile, eyes glistening, because the girl with kind eyes had her voice again. Ryan screamed, threatened, collapsed into denial as security escorted him out. No applause followed. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs truth. Silence fell. Then slowly, respect filled the room. Executives turned from Ryan to Sophie, not as a waitress, not as a discarded dream, not as a shadow behind someone else's success. They looked at her with something far greater. Recognition. James stood first, not like a savior, but like someone honored to stand beside strength. This company, he said firmly, addressing the room, will publicly recognize Sophie Reynolds as the rightful creator. Effective immediately, the stolen patents revert to her ownership. And if she agrees, he looked at her gently. We'd like her to lead the project she was always meant to. The board nodded. Lawyers approved. No one questioned greatness when they finally saw it. Sophie couldn't speak for a moment. Years of shame dissolved. Years of silence shattered. Years of being unseen ended. Tears filled her eyes. Not broken tears, victorious ones. She nodded slowly. I accept. William clapped his hands silently, laughing in joy. James laughed too, relieved, proud, awed. Because yes, justice won. But something bigger happened too. Sophie didn't just prove Ryan wrong. She reclaimed herself. No longer invisible. No longer afraid. No longer small, because someone convinced her she should be. She stood tall, powerful, capable, finally free. Ryan's empire crumbled in headlines within hours. Fraud exposed. Funding withdrawn. Reputation shattered. The world that once applauded him now turned its back. And the world that once ignored Sophie finally saw her shine. The press called it scandal. James' father called it justice. James called it the smartest business decision of his life. But for Sophie, it was something far simpler. It was breathing again. Fully. Openly. Proudly. She didn't just get justice that day. Life had something even bigger waiting beyond it. The morning sun poured through the wide windows of Sophie's new office, scattering gold light across sleek blueprints and models of buildings that weren't just structures. They were dreams made tangible. For the first time in years, Sophie could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on her chest. The designs, the patents, the recognition, they were all hers. Her vision restored. Her firm wasn't just a business. It was a promise. Spaces filled with light, ramps for accessibility, quiet reading corners, gardens for children and the elderly alike. Every creation carried a whisper of William's gentle spirit, a tribute to the man whose warmth had first believed in her when the world had looked away. Sophie's phone buzzed softly. A message from James. Meet me in the garden. I have something to say. She smiled, a real smile that crinkled her eyes, and walked out to the rooftop garden of their shared office space. James was already there, the morning breeze ruffling his hair, the city sprawling below them like an unrolled map of endless possibilities. I've been waiting to tell you this, he said, voice steady but vulnerable. Through everything, through Ryan, through the fraud, through all of it, I realized I wasn't just drawn to your brilliance. I'm in love with you, Sophie. I always have been. Sophie froze, heartbeat pounding. She had spent years believing she didn't deserve happiness, that love was a luxury she had lost the right to. And yet, standing there, feeling the sincerity in his eyes, hearing the quiet conviction in his voice, she allowed herself to hope. I think I've always been waiting to hear you say that, she admitted, a tear slipping down her cheek. And maybe I deserve this too. James reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they had always belonged together. Around them, the city thrummed with life, but in that moment, nothing else existed. Only trust, honesty, and the beginnings of something tender and enduring. William appeared behind them, clapping his hands softly with a smile that radiated pride. "You've come far, Sophie," he signed, his eyes shining. "And you've taught all of us that courage and kindness can change lives." Sophie laughed lightly, the sound free and unburdened. She realized she had spent so long hiding, shrinking herself, and yet now she stood tall, recognized, respected, and loved. Not because someone gave her that life, but because she fought to reclaim it. Her firm thrived. Projects poured in, each more ambitious than the last, and every building she designed carried the philosophy she had always believed in. That architecture wasn't just about structures, but about creating spaces where every person felt seen, valued, and safe. Evenings were spent with James and William, talking about ideas, sharing laughter, and dreaming together. Love had returned, not as a fleeting fantasy, but as something grounded, real, and enduring. Sophie had finally learned that strength and vulnerability could coexist, and that happiness wasn't just for others. It was hers to claim. The girl who had once hidden in shadows, quiet and unseen, had become a woman who commanded attention not through arrogance, but through authenticity, courage, and compassion. And in the hearts of those who knew her story, she became unforgettable. Because Sophie had learned the most important truth of all: life doesn't just return what was stolen. Sometimes it gives more than justice. It gives love. It gives purpose. It gives hope. The girl who became invisible became unforgettable. Sometimes life breaks us in ways we never expect. But sometimes the very moment we think our story is over is exactly when a new one begins. Sophie didn't just win a case. She won back her voice, her dignity, her future, and a love built on truth and respect. Because when kindness meets courage, justice doesn't just happen. Life becomes beautiful again.